it's a cute argument, but we should have some actual evidence.
I understand.
All right. 2016 now session on the please be seated.
Thank you, ma'am. And let's go ahead and set forth our position, our appearances for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joel Odou on behalf of CommunityLifestyles.com, Inc., Real Water, Inc., and Real Water Gold Coast.
Good morning, Judge. Jim Neal with Nick Hoffman, Joan Anderson, and Dave Spurlock on behalf of UNFW.
Good morning, Your Honor. Scott Rasmussen. I'll be on Hanna Instruments, Inc.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jim Kavanaugh for Real Water of Tennessee, LLC.
And I think that covers all appearances. Is that correct?
Mr. Robbins is going to be on, and I've been talking this morning. I thought he was on Blue Jeans. See that?
He's not on.
Well, he might be heading in, but
He'll join us.
yep, exactly.
Okay, on our list, we have next up with the. I think we're at plaintiff's motion in limine number 28, right?
Yes, Your Honor. I was arguing that particular one.
Yes.
Going to be thrown. It's came to the court. I'll go ahead and continue with that.
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And the lectern if you need it.
Can you give me that Real Water document?
Your Honor, when we were here last time, we asked questions about the manufacturing process.
Right.
And so, to answer,
And I did learn a lot about the process, by the way.
thank you.
It's very important.
I wanted to make sure that I had the backup documents for that and also how this leads to why this particular testing is relevant. And Mark is trying to get someone to give him the ability to go over. Thank you. We'll go to page 11, Mark. Right now, yeah, this is where we're at. You're on, this is the, we're going to go to page 1. It was a real water, I'm going to go to page 1 to make sure I've done that first. Establishment of the inspection report. This is Real Water Inc., Anderson, Nevada. This goes over what they tell, they're telling, I believe, the FDA is what they do in order to do the manufacturing process. And I go back to page 11. So under testimony, this is what they say. During the inspection, meaning when the FDA was there, they did not do it with all the water. The final production was in the morning. Production ceased prior to the start of the inspection in the afternoon. Facility is located in approximately blank square feet. You'll see these B4s. Some of the areas of this were redacted. It was not my decision. I'm not sure it was really Real Water's decision, but they redacted some of these things. Okay? With individual entrances and roll-up access doors. The main part of the production area is a double-wide section. So that's what we're talking about. It looks like a double-wide, like a trailer. It's not a trailer door. It is a building, but the double-wide because I can go in and out of 2 different bays. So I can put trucks on it. The main part of the production area is that with 2 wide roll-up access doors and 1 man door. Next to it, there is a section with single man door. We talked about this. Water purification, bottling, storage, and distribution takes place in suite, and they identify it. They diagram the main section of the building, and it shows this. That was provided to Southern Nevada Health District, SCHS, pre-attachment 11. Not sure who that is. Let's go to the next page, please. Look at it. Up at the very top. Right here is identified to all of us, to the FDA, what was in the water as far as ingredients. So you had purified water, okay? Then they added the following things: potassium bicarbonate, potassium hydroxide, magnesium chloride, and purified water. Okay? Let you get where you need to be.
No, go ahead.
So the ingredients that real water put into the water are those minerals, salts, and purified water. What is not on that list is hydrazine. Okay? So when Dr. Babcock did his testing in order to be substantially similar to what real water said they put into the water, we followed the ingredients that they testified or told the FDA, this is what we get. And these are the ingredients that we use. Okay? The range they wanted was negative 225, but this is what they want. They need to go with the word range, Your Honor. When you use an ORP meter, and I put it into a solution, it'll get me stabilized to a particular point. If I did that 10 minutes later, it would give me a different point, perhaps. If a speck of dust, or lots of dust, fell into that water or solution, or whatever it may be, it may give me a reading different than all that. So it's a range. Okay? It's not a point that stays the same because the solution it's in can change. Okay? Which is why I've told you that an ORP meter has a range of up to plus 1,000 and down to negative 1,000. Okay? The range that real water wanted was negative 225 to negative 300. Now, with that in mind, when we put these particular ingredients, or when Dr. Babcock put these ingredients into a test solution for them to run, because this is all that we knew. This is what we have. We are not told at this point, oh, you have hydrazine. Remember from last Friday, I indicated to you that hydrazine is an alkaline material, meaning if added to a solution, it will make it more negative because it's alkaline in its very nature. Okay? So in other words, whatever we got from this is what we got, but we didn't have hydrazine to it. There was a reason for that, and I told you that, and that was we don't have titanium tubes. Now, we don't know whether or not the hydrazine was added as a result of the titanium tubes. We believe so. But there is no testing that was done by the plaintiffs, and there was no testing done by the defense to say this is for sure where the hydrazine was introduced through the titanium tubes. It could have come from some other source. No one did the testing to find out the source of the hydrazine. Okay? But the subject water that we're testing to, not what the plaintiffs tell us to do, because we're not following what the plaintiffs are telling us to do. We're using what the FDA found, what was testified to by the real water, and we said, this is what we need to create. And this is what Dr. Babcock created, was this solution with these ingredients and purified water. Okay? And that's in his report. I did this is what I did. As a result of that, can we go to the Babcock report now? Going down a ways. Let's go down. All right, so just so you see that first paragraph right there, page 2, the first sentence. I just told you, I want to make sure you've got it, so it's in the record. Page 2 of 18 of Dr. Babcock's report, first sentence of the paragraph under Milwaukee Instruments MW500 ORP says, the Milwaukee Instruments MW500 is capable of reading ORP values in a range of plus minus 1,000. So plus 1,000 all the way down to negative 1,000. That's what it's able to do. And it reads them not in what's the chemical, but what's the electrical. So this is an electrochemical analysis. It is not telling me what the chemistry is. It can only tell me that. It only tells me what the electrical voltage is in millivolts. So it goes from 1 volt, that's what we're looking at. Okay? That's it, 1 volt. So it can't be electrocuted by 1 volt. According to the specification provided the user manual, the unit has a resolution of 1 millivolt, that's what I just said, and actually a plus 5 millivolts at 25 degrees Celsius. Okay, which means if my temperatures vary, so will that range. This warehouse that we were just talking a little bit about was an unair conditioned area. Thus, the fluctuation of accuracy will change based on the temperature. Okay? If I do something early in the morning in December, it might be, 32 degrees, let's say. It's possible here in Gallagher we can get it to a freezing temperature. Very rare, but it's possible. We also know that in mid-August we can have a range of up to plus 118. Why? Because we're indoors now at this spot with two open big bay doors. And this is unair conditioned. Okay? So this will all change and fluctuate. Okay? Then it tells you how you do it. You collect an ORP reading. We're talking about a measurement here, not a test. Probe containing the platinum electrode is connected to the MW500 meter and immersed into a sample. The instrument has been switched on and the reading is shown on a digital display. That's all that it does. Okay? There's no function available to calibrate the probe. The plaintiff's expert, warnings expert, talks about calibration. And the plaintiff's motion suggests that their expert, Dr. Motley, is critical of the calibration of this machine. In fact, he uses the word calibration 3 or 4 times in his report. We're not looking at the calibration because there's no function available to calibrate the meter or probe. The calibration occurs at the factory. So if Mr. Motley's concerned about the calibration that happened at the factory, that's great. We'll deal with that. But this testing had to do with conditioning. Okay, so he's critical of calibration, but we're doing testing on the conditioning of the probe. Okay, so it may be irrelevant to what Dr. Motley wants to do with regard to calibration, but we're dealing with conditioning. Okay, let's go down to. Keep going down, would you? Mark, I think we'll bring it down to the page. That's what the meter looks like that he used. We showed this already. Keep going. Negative water production. Okay. This is how they did it. This is how they went through it. This meaning real water did this in order to create the concentrate. Or he's not used here. Go on to the next page, please. Page 5. Dilation of final product was the E2 concentrate production. That's the concentrate that they use that they'll put into the mixing tank. Okay. Dr. Babcock is critical of the mixing procedures, and that was part of his testimony at the time of trial. Okay. They also did several other kinds of tests. Note here in the characterizations. They did an ozone test. They did a pH test. They did a PS test and an ORP test. It's really not a test. Remember, the last one, ORP, is really a measurement. Okay? I'm just telling you what it is at that point in time in that space for that solution. And if you wait more time, if you add something else, that will change. Okay, let's go on to the next page, please. All right, keep going. Then we get to the super bad batch, which we've talked about a little bit. Okay? And what happened? Blaine Jones, right, says that sometime in September or October 2010, it had much concentrate added, too much concentrate added, or the meter was read incorrectly. Okay? Reading was incorrectly read. He said there was a batch made by KCH at the Henderson facility where he added extra minerals, and there was an issue with the pump that produced that batch. This is his testimony. There's the reference on his index, footnote 30. However, later in the same deposition, Mr. Jones testified, it's my understanding that the same amount of ingredients were used, but the fact that the pump was not circulating and mixing correctly led to a small amount of the bottles of that batch having a higher concentration of minerals from the lower portion. So let me explain what he's saying. I have a mixing tank. It's 800 gallons of water. I've got a bad pump. If I'm mixing something at 800 gallons, I have to be able to mix from the top to the bottom. Hydrazine and these minerals all weigh more than a water molecule, which means the heavier material is going to sink to the bottom. If I'm only using one pump to do that, by the laws of physics, I can't get the stuff on the bottom to mix with the stuff on the top. I don't have enough energy to do so with one circulating pump. So what's going on is this is what's happened here. Of that mixing tank being bottled for conversion that production line. I looked at the meter was a factor in it. Let me make sure I understand that. This is William Jones saying in his deposition testimony. Quote, I don't think the meter was a factor in that. In it. Period. So that meter we just talked about, it's not mixed correctly. This is William Jones. Other than that, maybe Mr. Aiken was not following the correct procedure for testing. Okay. For Mr. Aiken's deposition, there was concern about a problem with the water. This was brought to his attention by Stephen Bonar, who helped Real Water move out of the desert in facility. Mr. Aiken testified that he indicated to Mr. Bonar they had added more concentrate to a batch of water. This conversation led the timeline events to the sewer bad batch having been made in September, October 2020, because it was the only time Mr. Aiken made. It was the only time that was only time Mr. Aiken made that batch. Okay, so I have a new employee, Mr. Aiken. Okay, who has no experience and is not a chemist, and his first batch is what he's doing. Okay, and this is what happens. He's talking to someone else there. What happened? Okay, let's go back. Next group, Mark. Very top. So he adds what he calls the 2.5 gallons. Okay. Just making again in the process of making the batch. This is that super bad batch. The ORP reading came back a little lower. In real terms, we'll find out that the difference is about 95 on a scale or range, of 2,000, which is less than 5%. Okay? For chemistry and this sort of stuff just isn't that big, but we don't have a chemist on the other side to tell us that. That was part of the argument that I was making. A little lower than normal. Now, Mr. Aiken indicated the value was approximately negative 130. Remember, they wanted that negative 225, which means I'm 70 plus 25, I'm 95 away from 225. Okay? I'm going to go up to 225, but I'm going more negative. Okay? After seeing the read of Flight 130, he contacted Mr. Jones by phone, who notified Mr. Aiken to add a little bit more concentrate. So Mr. Aiken added a little bit more concentrate, but we'll find out it wasn't just a little. Okay, go on to the next one. Mr. Aiken testified that after discussion with the Jones, he added another 2.5 gallons of concentrate. So in other words, what he thought was 2.5 gallons, he put it into the 800 mix, he then doubled that, put in another one. Now, remember, when it was found out that it was a low, what were the choices that Real Water could have made at that point? Choice number one, let's get a different meter, see whether or not we've got a problem with the meter. Let's go test it against something else. That might be a scientific way of figuring out if something's wrong. They didn't choose that. Okay? Number two, they could have started over. Let's flush this one out, let's start again, make sure that all of our stuff is there. Let's check our purification machine. Let's check the D&L machine, which is the bottler plus the bottle washing machine. Okay? Let's check the tanks to see whether or not there's something in there. Let's check the pumps to see if they're circulating properly. All of those things could have been done, and were not. Okay? Could have done all sorts of things at that point to see what the issue is. They didn't do any of those things. Okay? Instead, this amount then resulted in a proper reading. So in other words, they doubled it, and then they got a proper reading. But remember also, Your Honor, this will come out with Dr. Babcock. Not only did they double the concentrate with just regard to what what Mr. Kemp said is double the hydrogen. They doubled all those minerals as well. Remember when we talked about Dr. Marlowe? This has been a week or so ago. Mr. Marlowe, I'm sorry. You're right. I gave him too much. You're right. You gave him too much. Fair enough. Mr. Marlowe said that the way that he came up with the ingredients to use and the amounts to use, that he would, somewhere in his house, I guess, or somewhere else, would take purified water, or just water, or we don't know what kind of water, and he would add chemicals to it. I'm going to call them salts or minerals. Okay? The same ingredients that you saw that I gave you when I showed you the FDA product. And that's what he would pour into the stuff. And he would drink it. Then he would determine if he was sick or not. And if he felt sick, he would back down on some of these things until he felt like he could tolerate it. Remember, and I did, and Mr. Kemp is right. Mr. Marlowe is not a chemist. He basically uses himself as a human guinea pig to create the ingredients and the amounts of the ingredients that are supposed to be used. Now, I will tell you that in Mr. Marlowe's deposition, there's a significant part of that that is sealed. I don't think we've taken the seal off of that. So we don't, and I'm not going to tell you what the amounts are, and I'll skip over that in the report, because he believes all of that's proprietary information, and that's fine. But understand what happened, what Casey Aiken did is that he doubled the amount of everything in that concentrate. Okay? The choices he had could have been different than that. He could have put in a quart, a cup, a pint. Okay? He could have put in 5 grams if he was going with the metric system. He could have done all sorts of things. He could have tested the meters again. He could have brought out a brand new meter. He could have done all sorts of things. Okay? He didn't do any of those things. He literally just doubled it. But that was not, the meter has no idea. All it can do is measure what you've got. Okay? Not something we anticipate. We don't even know what they're doing. Okay? Ultimately, Mr. Aiken could not verify if the ORP meter was actually working properly that day. He couldn't do it because Mr. Aiken is not a chemist. Mr. Aiken does not have any knowledge, and he testifies to this in his deposition that was taken later. Do you understand safe laboratory practices? And he says, no, I don't. I don't know. All I know how to do is put a probe in water. I don't know what it means when I've done that. I don't know what it does. I don't know anything. By the way, Mr. Motley says the same. Yes.
Here's my question, and unless I'm missing something, but I don't think, as far as your client's concerned, the plaintiff is alleging a design defect, right?
I don't believe he is saying that the ORP meter has a design defect.
Okay. And he's not alleging a manufacturing defect.
I don't believe he's alleging a manufacturing defect.
There is evidence that 10% probe shipped didn't work from Jason Brown, but we are not alleging a manufacturing defect.
Yeah.
So 10% weren't working.
Yeah. Well, here's
We
my
know why that is.
yeah, but here's my point. And this is what I'm really trying to get to. If there, and it's my understanding, you even say this on page 5, and I think this is a fairly good summary. You said the claim basically alleges that Hanna failed to provide warning labels about ensuring proper maintenance and accuracy of the meter.
That's what the allegation is. And so this is what this testing has to do with. How much maintenance is required right out of the box in order to do this? And so he tested it to see if it reads negative right out of the box. In other words, no maintenance has been done yet. You literally get it out of the box, you put it into a solution to see if it reads negative alkaline. And the answer was, yeah, it does. In fact, we're going to show that to you. So in other words, that dissuades this maintenance requirement for something that's done when no maintenance was required yet. Okay? Right out of the box.
What was the meter that was utilized in this in the potentially, I guess we'll call it bad batch, was that a new meter? Was that an old meter? Do we know?
We believe it was an old meter.
Okay.
So whether or not they maintained it, okay, but what we do know about it is this. Our maintenance guideline says put it in distilled vinegar. Mr. Aiken testified that every time and in between the time that they used the meter, they always stored it in distilled vinegar. That's his deposition testimony. That's the proper maintenance of the pro. Okay? Now, right on the warning label of the, let's see if I can find my, right next to you is a back box. Yeah, that right there. Thank you.
And see, my question really comes down to, I mean, I understand the testing, but if there's no design defect being alleged,
Right.
if there's no manufacturing defect being alleged as far as controlling documents,
Right.
and the sole issue comes down to whether Hanna failed to provide a proper warning label as it pertains to proper maintenance and accuracy, I'm trying to figure out, and there's some other questions I have, but you already answered the age question I had as far as age of the meters that were being utilized on the day. But I'm trying to figure out for what purpose would this testing come in.
Okay.
Because I asked it at the very beginning.
You did.
I did, because I don't mind telling everyone this. Whenever I look at evidence that's being objected to, the first question I have on my mind is for what purposes is it being offered,
Why is
right?
it relevant?
Why is it relevant?
Right. So let me give you an answer to that as straightforward as I can. One of the allegations of plaintiffs is that our warning labels and instructions were not good enough to tell someone that it needed to be oxidized for 5 days. In other words, it had to be put in vinegar for 5 days in order for it to be able to be used. Okay? And that communication was all over the board. In other words, sometimes it said 2 days, sometimes it said 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, all of these things. The testing that we did on the solution that we used, okay, was that
I have a question on the solution. I don't want to cut you off. Is it the same solution that was being utilized at Real Water?
the answer is what I just showed you. There's the ingredient list. We put all of those ingredients into the test solution. What we did not put into the test solution was hydrazine, because that wasn't on the list of ingredients used by Real Water. Okay? It's not there. Okay? Remember also that the data shows that the amount of hydrazine that they found, at least by the FDA, was 300 parts per billion. Okay?
Eurofins.
Sorry, what, Ripple?
That's the Eurofins test.
Okay. The point is that we asked, and we asked Dr. Babcock to use the test solution to mimic, substantially similar to what Real Water said they used. The one thing that we could not mimic is the Russian-made titanium tubes. We couldn't get those. There's an embargo. There's a federal statute right now that doesn't allow us to go to Russia and say, hey, we'd like to buy some of these Russian-made porcelain-coated titanium tubes to shock the water so that you have negative ions going one way and positive ions going another way. We could not do that. Okay? Is that substantial? No. All it means is that we have to have an alkaline water, and that's all we wanted to produce. Which means, Your Honor, that with just
So where did the titanium tubes, what role did they play in this as far as the manufacturing process and the ultimate product that was produced?
well, that's up to debate as to what role they placed, if any, because the theories of that this is where the hydrogen was introduced, that is a theory. It has not been tested that these titanium tubes could do that, but it is a theory. Okay? And that is up to
Well, it could
debate.
be because they were never utilized for this purpose before.
And no one saw that, as you've already stated, it was certainly an unintended consequence that nobody knew about. We certainly had no idea. And I had no idea that Russian-made titanium tubes were going to be used in a watering process in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay? It would be completely unforeseen. But what we could foresee is everything else that was there that Real Water did say. Hey, we have all of these different chemicals. Let me explain, Your Honor. With just those chemicals, those salts.
One last question, I'll let you finish. So the titanium rods, as far as part of the process, that was done prior to using and testing with the meter.
Before measuring with the meter.
Yes.
Yes.
Testing, measuring, or whatever.
Right. In fact, those were done way back here at the concentrate level.
I understand.
So the concentrate's made with those. In fact, that's the first part of the concentrate, is they run them through there. With the salts already in there, those minerals, they're in there. Then they put those into jugs. Then they take those from a room and they put them into a big tank. Then the tank gets supposedly mixed. Then once it's mixed, it goes through some PVC pipes that end up in the D&L machine, which does the bottling, and supposedly they have clean bottles. And then after all that's done, then they take an ORP measurement. The manufacturing process is done. All we're doing is distill an alkaline material. Then,
I mean, we don't even know if the titanium tubing or piping or whatever it wasn't part of the Russian space program, do we?
I don't know where they come from.
I mean,
I think
really,
it's
we
safe to
don't.
say it wasn't.
You think it's safe to say it was?
I think so. I'm willing to go out on that limb. Maybe somebody will prove me wrong.
The only reason we've learned a lot about how Russian society works today as a result of the war in Ukraine. I was just thinking to myself, we don't know who did what or where they came from or where they. I mean, we don't know. Do we even know who produced?
I don't. We certainly, Canada has no idea where they got them from. What we've heard from Mr. Marlowe is, I bought these tubes from some guy with a Russian name. He just kind of showed up in a, they met it like a hotel room, bought the tubes. I mean, that's the best way.
Hotel room?
Where was it at?
Oh, Jeff, we're beyond any.
They had dinner at Hank's, I think.
Yeah, dinner together somewhere. Is it a
Thanks in
restaurant?
Green Valley.
Yes. Bought the tubes, and then they were fitted with electric nodes so that they could charge the water. Okay? And by doing that, they would get negatively charged water and positively charged water. The positively charged water would be dumped into the sewer, down the drain. The negative one would remain. They would go through this process twice. They would create a concentrate with this that they would fill into either 2.5 gallon or 5 gallon storage tank or storage containers to be used as the mixing concentrate, the E2 mixing concentrate. Okay. Then at this point, it would go over to the mixing tanks and be used. Okay. What I wanted to show you was the test results. Mark, go back to that Mark report, please. We need to go back to the page. Let's go to page 11.
Test results for the
There we go.
measuring results.
Go ahead, keep going. There we go. That's the page. This is page 12. This is the table. So, using what Real Water told us was in the water as our test subject solution. Okay? Here's what they say they have. These are the results we got. Now, Mr. Peppermint said it was negative 115. Well, when we read it, with no conditioning, meaning we didn't, without maintaining it yet by anyone there, hadn't been subject to vinegar at all, we get an ORP reading of negative 148. Remember, Your Honor, Real Water was trying to find, we believe, a number of negative 225. Okay? So we're within 77. I'm doing my math correctly. Negative 77, which is within 3% of the similar solution. I think that's.
Say that again.
Remember what Mr. Peppermill will tell you, that it's substantially similar, right? We're not substantially similar. Okay? Somehow, our meter reading and what Real Water is going for have to be exactly the same. Well, exactly is not required by the law under Hallmark, right? Under Hallmark, it's substantially similar, right? So what the plaintiffs have said is that, well, it has to be negative 225. I don't agree with that premise. The plaintiffs don't get to decide what is substantially similar. We only want to make an alkaline water. to test against.
No, they don't decide that. I do, right?
That's right. Well, the plaintiffs are trying to tell you, or Mr. Pepper's trying to tell you that no, it has to be negative 225. Well, understand, we're within 77 of 225 right there. Or based on
You say we're within 77 to 225. What do you mean by
Right, so if I, my math could be wrong, Your Honor, but if I take 148 from 225, if I do that quick math, I believe the remaining amount is 77. If someone wants to calculate it out for me to make sure I'm off or something. So I'm doing it right in my head. If I take 225 minus 148, I believe the remainder is 77.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the range of this ORP meter is plus 1,000 to minus 1,000. That's the range. Right here on the box, it tells me that range of plus 1,000, negative 1,000. I can show you that on the box. Would you like to look at that, Your Honor?
No.
I don't think anyone's contesting that's what it is, although Mr. Pepperman suggested that this particular meter.
So if their range was, would you say 225?
No, that's the range that Real Water wanted,
Right.
negative 225 to negative 300.
Okay.
The range of the meter, its ability to read things, goes from plus 1,000 to negative 1,000. I guess I could show it this way in an Alamo. Let's see if this works. Ray, what do I do?
I'm going to 2 cents. And
So am I looking at this wrong? I mean, if I look at that first reading, that would be about 30% off, give or take.
No.
What's the percentage off from 225?
225 down to 148.
Right.
It's off 77, right?
No, that's the number, but I'm talking about the percentage.
Right, let's go over it. I've got here.
I just did a rough estimate there.
Okay, let's do an estimate that makes sense, that I think makes sense. If I can go all the way up from negative 1,000 all the way to positive 1,000, right? 100 equals 5% of that total range. All right. If I had a range of 0 to 1,000.
But no, but I'm comparing the actual reading he received to the target of 225 to 300.
But that's Real Water's requested amount. Okay?
But I mean, isn't that what Real Water was relying upon? Isn't that wasn't that the target?
That was their target, not any target that we have to do. We just have this range. That's our range. We can do something in between here. So I've given you the numbers right here. Right? There's your negative 300. There's your negative 200. We're right here at negative 140. We're right there. We're within 77 of it. Within 77. On the whole range of this ORP meter, as a chemist will tell you, the difference is only 3%. The difference, in other words, we could have put all those chemicals together, put them into water, Your Honor. That number could have been plus 800. Follow me?
No, I understand that, but I'm looking at it because they weren't going plus; they were going negative, and it's my
Yes, they were.
But it's my recollection, based upon some of the prior discussion, the positive readings weren't a big deal. It's in fact that it would routinely have no problem with that. It was the negative readings they had to go through some
So
process.
now you're asking an engineering question. What does the range of positive and negative have to do with all of these things? Well, when they first started and did the filtered water, they did that test as well, and they were way over here in the positives. The filtered water had no negative.
I understand that. I
All right, so in other words, the range at the beginning out here is way over here in positive land. Okay? Then they add their chemicals and they get it over to here. But my full range that this ORP is able to do is 2,000. 1,000 positive, 1,000 negative. The purified water that they started with was over here.
Okay, so tell me, what type of solution would there be in order to get a reading of 900?
Of 900?
Yes.
Oh, you wouldn't want to do that.
Or 800.
What?
Or we'll go 800. We won't go to the extreme.
All right, so what you're trying to do is...
What kind of solution would that be?
That would be things that would have huge oxygen and hydrogen hydroxides, things like this that would have to be put in there in order to get that high.
Right.
Okay? In other words, I've got an abundance of hydrogen atoms. I've got so many that this is what happens. When you get into that kind of stuff, you're talking about algae plumes in lakes. Like when you get up into the Great Lakes, you'll hear about those red algae outbreaks and things like that. That's when you get into that sort of stuff. Those things like that means
That's more Florida.
Florida can do that, sure, but
From
it's,
the Great Lakes. I don't. but
Well,
but go ahead.
they use those a lot on cranberry farms. They have to worry about that because there's just so much oxygen in there and so much hydrogen that it becomes abundant that algae can grow. Bacteria can grow and things like that. That's what you're worried about over here in the 800s. Okay?
Okay. And my question is, what about the negative 800s?
Okay, so negative 800, now I'm worried about.
Is there anything? I mean, I don't. It's been so
This
long.
is chemistry.
I was always say it's been so long since I did chemistry. I mean, are we talking about the differences between base and acidic or anything like that? Is that what's
We
going on?
are pH is what that does.
Okay. Is that what we're talking about here?
No.
Okay.
This has to do with ORP, oxygen reduction potential.
Okay. I got you.
Okay. And the way you measure that is with electricity. Okay, in millivolts. Okay, so not a volt, but a millivolt. And 1,000th of a volt. Okay? And so you've got these
Do
negative.
we know what the generally active range might be for this sport meter? And what I mean by that, yeah, I mean typically, what I'm saying is this. I mean, I don't know what are the chances of getting a positive 800 versus a negative 800, and what type of solutions those would be. I just need a little bit more foundation so I can go ahead.
So those solutions would be something that has a lot of hydrogen in would be your positives. Those that have negatives would be your alkalis. -1 means that the solution is alkaline in nature. It becomes more alkaline as it goes down. So why is that important? Well, let's assume for a second you went out to a fish pond, okay, where I want to see whether or not we can have fish that's going to be able to grow or be able to multiply inside of this pond water. The answer to that is, if it's alkaline in nature, it can't, because there's not enough oxygen and hydrogen and other things there in order for the plant life and the microorganisms and everything else that's needed in order to have the full cycle of life for trout to be able to procreate and be there and have a healthy system. So we have to reduce the alkaline materials in order for that to happen. Do we see these sort of ponds? Yeah, the dead ponds that you'll find, yes, because there's something wrong with them. When I was living out in Missouri where I was in law school, they would go out to these ponds that were everywhere and they would find them dead. Why? Because there had been chemical spills from various manufacturers of chemicals that had been poured into the water. And then when that environmental issue comes up, you look at it and say, "Oh heavens, look, it's a dead pond. We can't get fish to grow here." Now that would be what one person wants to see there. On another side of that is that, in this case, real water, we like alkaline water because that oxygen doesn't connect with a person's body and reduce and takes away the oxygen, water molecules in other parts of the body and flushes them down. In other words, let me give it to you in an easier sense. Tums, you ever had a Tums? I use that brand. That's an alkali type cereal. It calms your stomach down when you have heartburn. Heartburn means my stomach acids are more, and the reflex from that is becoming too much for my body to handle. So if I eat a Tums, I'll take that down. I'll reduce it, which is oxidation reducing potential. So we use Tums in order to stop that. Okay? In this case, they were just trying to make this into a liquid water form. I'm just going to drink alkaline water, and I'll bring down my body's natural or not natural or abnormal amount of acids in my stomach. Yes.
I started thinking fine.
Let's get back to what we were discussing, but the range is very important with this, Your Honor. It's 2,000. And the difference between -148 and -225 in millivolts Not even 1 volt of electricity. Remember, into your house is 225 volts.
Well, how come the testing never reached the desired range? And that's my understanding that would have been anticipated or expected from real water.
Right, so real water didn't realize they were putting hydrazine in their own water. On the ingredients list, the word hydrazine doesn't appear. Right?
But my question is this: I think I'm just getting back to the readings, because wouldn't real waters go negative 225 to 300?
Yes.
And they never got that type of reading.
Oh, they did.
When I looked at the list, I thought it was less than that.
So my list from our testing, which did not use hydrazine, was negative 148.
Right, that's what I thought.
Go back to that list, will you? Take mine off. I'll turn off the power. I do it right?
Yes.
From the list shown on page 12 of Babcock's report.
Because I think 148 was the first day, or the first
No, this
test.
is the wrong one. There's your ingredients list, right? I don't have hydrazine listed because real water told us we don't have hydrazine here. Okay?
Does anyone know whether they had, when they made the bad batch, whether they were new titanium tubes from Russia?
I think they were not, Your Honor, because when we took the titanium tubes and we had them analyzed, there was significant pigment in them, so I think we were at the end of the life of whatever tube they were using at that time.
All right.
Okay, so
Remember, Your Honor, they got all the titanium tubes at once. They didn't get replacement tubes over time.
Okay.
They got 8 or 10 back in the, I think it was the 80s or 90s. Whenever they got the tubes, they got
It's
it.
from the space program. I really do.
So our testing that we did, let's go back to Babcock's report now when we get the negative 148. The ingredient list that I just showed you.
Oh yeah, let's look at your list again. And so my question is this: I'm looking there, and I guess my recollection is correct. 148, I guess, conditioning time of 0, and there's other times there as far as hours.
Yep.
But they were never able to replicate the target range. Maybe I call it the target range.
Yes, the target range by real water. And why is that?
225,
Right.
300, yeah.
Right. Why is that? That's your question.
Yes.
The answer is there's no hydrazine in our test solution. Because we don't have the titanium tubes. This testing, and Dr. Babcock testifies to this several times, and it is in his report. He does this testing pursuant to ASTM standards, the American Society of Testing Materials, right? You've heard this in many cases. You know what ASTM is. You know it better than I do. I'll be honest, okay? But ASTM standards are what are used. And there's no ASTM standard that we could find where we found Russian-made porcelain.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
We don't find it.
I really don't.
But he's a scientist, and he can't go out there on a whim and say, let's try to get this stuff in there as well and look at it. I mean, we couldn't get it, okay? The ones that they had, I think, are very, very old. We have no idea what the conditions are. Yes, they do have them in the vault. They have the old ones that are pitted and been used. We've seen those. But we don't subject those to any other than ASTM standards. So we did this without hydrazine. We still got negative 148. Now, why is negative 148 important? That's still an alkaline material. It's still alkaline. You understand what I mean?
No, I understand. I do.
But we're not going to get to that range unless you have hydrazine. And it's not on Real Water's list of ingredients. So then you would say, well, why didn't you just take some hydrazine off the store shelf and throw that in there?
Well,
No.
actually, I was thinking more of why weren't the same processes utilized by Real Water utilized by the expert, i.e., why didn't he try to replicate the solution by utilizing the titanium rods or piping?
Good question.
Yeah, that's really what I was thinking about, because one thing I don't think, maybe we know this, maybe we don't, but in listening to this, do we know what impact, if any, the titanium rotting had in the manufacturing of the system be it base or more alkaline or more acidic. I mean, I don't know, but it seems to me in order to try to replicate what happens in real water, the titanium rods play an important role.
We can't get those. Do you understand that, Your Honor?
Well, I understand that, but I'm just trying to. And does anyone know what impact those have, if any, in the processes?
What we do know, Your Honor, when those titanium tubes are used, okay, with these ingredients in a concentration tank used at real water, where they created these concentrates. In the concentrates, they found hydrazine. So somewhere in this process of using purified water, the ingredients I've just shown you, plus the titanium tubes, somehow hydrazine was introduced. Now, where did this hydrazine come from? Did it come through the purified water? Maybe. Could it be from tap water? Possible. Could it come from the titanium tubes? Possible. It could come from a number. Remember, we're only talking about parts of very, very small parts. Now, plaintiffs suggest it's larger amount of hydrogen they use. But remember, the very first slide that I showed you when I got up here to argue was, what is hydrogen?
Yeah, did anybody do any testing where potentially, and I don't know what the whole ingredient list would have been from real water as it pertains to alkaline water, but was there any testing done when you put a certain concentrate of whatever the chemicals are along with the titanium tubing that maybe hydrogen is a natural byproduct of that process?
The plaintiffs did not conduct any of that testing. We have the ORP meter. We don't have the titanium tubes. The water didn't do that testing, and they're not being reminding the court one thing, and it's stressed in plaintiff's expert Wissam Najim's report. That is this: hydrazine is an unstable molecule that degrades. We've talked about this.
Yeah, we have.
Okay. So let's suppose that I do the testing for hydrazine, and when I come into this case, and let's say I do that testing in February of 2023, this year, okay? And I take those titanium, I try to find, which I can't get a hold of, but let's say I find something else that looks like titanium, and I try to put that in there, and I try to replicate the entire thing, which we can't. What happens is that degradation. Let's say I take the water that's there at real water, and I take those and I say, let's see how much hydrogen there is today. Well, the FDA did that. They did that testing. Okay? We have those results. They took the water and tested it. What do they have in it? We found out. Okay? But remember, the FDA doesn't come back and say, oh, well, the hydrazine is the cause of these people being sick. They don't say that. Okay? But what we do know about hydrazine itself is that it's an alkaline material. What's that? Slide number 1 that says the definition of hydrazine. Let me just go back to slide 1 quick. This is the definition of hydrogen. Colorless, stable gas with strong alkaline reaction, also called, and then there's a word that only Mr. Evans have been really good at pronouncing it, deaminogen. Sure, I said that wrong. Now use ESP in rocket fuels. Okay? But the important word, the underline, is the word strong alkaline reaction.
Now, one thing we do know, is this true or not? We know this, that from what we can tell based upon the expert testing, that if he attempted to duplicate the chemical alkaline solution that was used by real water, that didn't contain hydrazine.
That's right, we have that. That's the negative 148. No hydrogen gives negative 148. Okay. We don't reach the level that they had of 225, but remember, the negative 225 has hydrazine in it. We found it in the concentrate. Okay? Well before the ORP is used. right? Remember I said that hydrazine, what did we say it degrades, right? So the concentrate used at the Henderson manufactured sometime in February, we believe, or January, February, maybe March of 2020. It is not used until September, so 9 months later. How much did the hydrazine degrade between that time limit? Blaine Jones, by the way, will testify that he would make the concentrate within a few days. They would use that concentrate. Okay? Now we have a 9-month period. Did that hydrazine degrade during that time? Most likely. And if it did, and I'm not a chemist, this is part of the problem we have here. I need to get to that one last thing I really need to tell the court, and that's this. The plaintiff's motion is based on the following. Mr. Pepperman says we have two different kinds of meters. One is black, one is white. And we're showing in their motion that the form or the way that they work, the plus minus 1,000 range, is the exact same range used. There's no difference between the black one or the white one. They do the exact same things. The guts of the meters is exactly the same. The outer casing is just a different color. That's all. So they are not two different kinds of meters. Unless you want to count the color, which I don't think you should, Your Honor. That was his point number one. They're not. Number 2 point was that we had two other probes that we sent with this one that were older. We sent them to Dr. Babcock on purpose. We knew they were old. We needed to make sure he understood what happens to probes that are old and what happens to them, what happens to their ability to be effective. Now remember, up until then, we had been sending probes to these people and things to them all the time. And if those things gave out after their useful life, they replaced them. They knew that how this process worked. Okay? But Dr. Babcock had not seen how this process worked. Okay? So he got to two old ones so he could see this is the change that will happen. Having said that, Your Honor, we're only checking to make sure they're alkaline in nature. Our testing isn't to get to negative 225. Our testing is to see whether or not, out of the box, conditioning matters. That's all I'm working with here. The plaintiffs are trying to define what we're doing. Right? And what you're getting hung up on is negative 225. That's not what the testing is about. The testing is, out of the box, if I put this out there, can it read negative? We already have a solution. That solution is alkaline nature, based on everything else being similar except for one thing, and that is we can't find titanium tubes. We've replicated everything that real water did except for that. We can't replicate that. Okay? We've done everything else that we can.
Could you have replicated the negative work readings as far as the test solution is concerned between 225 and 300?
No, not with that hydrazine, with those particular minerals. You can't. And let me explain why. From a chemical standpoint, remember how little of hydrazine that they found. Okay? Our test solution was in a 5-gallon container. Okay? Not an 800-gallon container. The amount of hydrazine in 5 gallons as opposed to 800, which they put this stuff into, you can't really get a good measurement. You can't take an eyedropper and put a drop in there. That's 1,000 per one of parts per 1,000. In order to replicate what they were finding, you'd have to go to parts per billion. There's no eyedropper that we can do. There's no small amount that you can do that gets you there. Dr. Babcock did his testing via ASTM standards, not standards that were going off into some other place, but what's scientifically allowed and been adjudged already by many courts that ASTM standards are exactly the kind of standards you're supposed to do when you do testing. And he followed those, and he said so several times. So we don't go off into some other place and try to replicate something using standards that have not already been shown to be the appropriate kind of standards to use when testing solutions. We have to follow ASTM standards or something that's recognized in the scientific community as being valid. We can't just go off willy-nilly and do something else. Now, that may be what you would say is what real water did. I can't help you on that one. But trying to replicate something that wasn't ASTM to begin with and then try to make it into ASTM, you can't do that.
But I mean, I don't necessarily think, as far as the type of testing that was being conducted, is it really an ASTM standard?
Yes.
Or is it trying to replicate to get the conditions that were occurring at real water?
There were ASTM standards, and Mr. Babcock, Dr. Babcock has testified to that, and written it in his report, testified to that in his deposition. He followed ASTM standards for how you do the testing for protocols using these ingredients.
But I come back to, but he didn't test in a solution that was the target range for real water.
You can't. Target range that we did not and were not able to add was titanium tubes, which would have affected the alkalinity of the water. Okay, we can't do something that's not allowed, number one, by ASTM, and number two, that may take us out of that range. May take us out of every range. Okay? But here's the point. I'm going to hear something back from here that says, Your Honor, don't listen to what Mr. Rasmussen is telling you. We're going to tell you as the chemist, Mr. Peppermint the chemist, Mr. Kemp the chemist, no, they could have done this. Well, they're not a chemist. And that's my point. When they show different parts of their motion, they don't cite to Mr. Motley or Dr. Motley and say, Dr. Motley says you should do this in order to reach this range. And you guys didn't do that. Therefore, your testing procedures were wrong. You didn't reach this range. Dr. Motley doesn't say that. It's just left out there uncited. In other words, no chemist on their side. I don't have a chemist expert over there saying, this is what you need to do in order to get to that range. Okay? Under substantially similar doctrine, the case law requires that under Hallmark, that an opinion as to whether or not you were substantially similar needs to be backed up by an expert. It can't be the advocate, the lawyer that says, I don't think it's a substantially similar testing. Dr. Babcock has already testified it is. And he's already telling you that it's within 3% of the target range. He's testified that. We're within 3% of the range of 2,000. We're within 3% of that at negative 148. We're there. That's a chemist's opinion. Somebody on the other side has to look at that same thing and say, no, you're not. And here's my expert to tell you that you're not substantially similar. I've already told you the one place that we are not similar. We don't have titanium tubes. Okay? Made in Russia with porcelain coating. We can't find those. Okay? And then to hold us back and say, oh, I need you to have those. I gotta have you have those. That's not fair. And that isn't the truth of what we're just trying to do. Remember, Your Honor, all we're trying to do is determine conditioning. How quick does this read? It's not whether or not we're doing the target and then determine how fast it reads. It's any alkaline material. How fast does it read? That's a very important part to this, Your Honor. I'm not there to see whether or not it reads faster or slower at negative 225. I'm there to determine whether or not any alkaline material reads negative or positive 225. Remember we had the Blaine Jones deposition or video? It's already well above that. But remember, he's using concentrate. Do we have that video, Mark? You don't have it? I think Chris had it. You've seen it. You know what I'm talking about here. Where he's sitting at a desk and he squirts some concentrate into a cup and it reads negative 1. It's going up, right? Yeah, Chris, put it up for it. It'd be great.
I do think I remember it, but we'll give you a chance to put that on.
Hello, my name is Blaine Jones, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Real Water.
We have the,
I have done hundreds of product
the actual video itself,
Yeah, it's,
not just the audio.
it should be.
There he is. All right, go back.
Hello, my name is Blaine Jones, and I'm the Executive Vice.
Part where he starts dipping it into the sunny water.
Go down there. Go back up. Let me just make sure you understand.
First thing that's very important that you want to make sure is that your ORT meter is properly calibrated.
Now,
And I'd like to take a minute and show you how to properly calibrate your ORT meter. If your ORT meter is not reading negative values very well, or is giving you inconsistent readings, that means that it needs to be properly calibrated.
which is not.
You do that by using these calibration tools that come from the manufacturer of the ORT meter itself. In this kit,
Don't argue with the video during
there are two solutions that you will place into glass cups. Do not use plastic, do not use paper. You need to use glass because of the property of these two solutions.
This is how these is calibrated, which is really traditional. By the way, they had these in 2020 when we went down and saw the Anderson facility. They had these.
Place the first solution in the first glass.
Okay.
Now you may use other glass containers to basically be able to close these after the fact, or you can use open glasses like I am.
I believe this is being used to tell their sales force how to do this.
Now in this kit, it gives you instructions on how to do this procedure properly, but we can show you it now. So the first thing you're going to do is take your ORT meter and the probe,
Follows those.
take the storage cap off, and place it in the first solution for about 60 seconds. Turning it and spinning it as you go to kind of move everything around and get it to soak up in that probe nicely. After you've let the probe sit in solution number 1 for 60 seconds, take it out, allow the excess to drip off the end of the probe, and rinse in a good clean water. You will place the probe in solution number 2 and mix as you're going for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes in solution number 2, again, allow the excess to come off the probe and rinse in a good clean water. That is one cycle of the calibration process. You will need to do that at least 2 to 3 times when you're calibrating your probe. You can even do it up to 6 times depending on the age and the condition of the probe and how out of calibration it is. But once you do this a number of times, your ORT meter and probe should read negative readings accurately and consistently. So now that you have your ORT meter calibrated, you're ready to do a product demonstration. You should also have some pH solution with you as well. The 2 types of bottled waters that I like to use are Dasani and Aquafina. Coke owns Dasani, Pepsi owns Aquafina, and then the number 1 and number 2 bottled waters in North America. So most likely, whoever you're demonstrating the product to has drank one of these bottles of water. Take a little bit of the water and pour it into some cups. Now you want to use some short, stocky cups when you're doing this. If they're tall and skinny, it might get knocked over as you're pouring or moving things around, so it makes it a little bit easier when you're doing the demonstration. Now that you've got some water in your cups, next thing you want to do is add some of the pH solution. I like to start with this because it gives that immediate wow factor of the color. Add a little bit into the first cup and a little into the second. And right there you see the color of the solutions of the water, and you can match it up on the pH chart to see that they're about a 3 or 4, 5 acid. Next thing you want to do is take your orb meter. Place the probe in the first solution. And you can show them now the positive reading on that probe. Go to the next solution. And you can see also the positive reading there. Now what you want to do is take your E2 concentrate, real water concentrate,
So here's the
and you want to
concentrate.
tell them to watch this part. Pay attention to the color of the water that you're going to be adding it to, and also the orb meter. It's going to change. It's going to have a little negative reading on the side there to switch from the positive to the negative. And you want to have them pay attention to this because this is the powerful, interesting part of the product demonstration. You just take some of that, pour it in to the solution. And you can see that color change and that negative charge on the probe now, or on the meter now. And that right there is a powerful demonstration for why, when you're testing regular bottled waters and what the E2 concentrate can do to make it alkalized and negatively ionized.
And what is it?
Now, you don't want to leave it in the negative solution.
Where does the reading end up? Do we know?
188 is the last number we see, negative 188.
I think it takes 12 seconds to get there. We have another slide that shows how long it takes to get to the negative reading.
You go back in time if you want to, you can show it goes.
No. But, okay. So the orb meter and the testing, basically, isn't that the same thing he did there?
We said we started with an alkaline. Yeah, we started with something that's like in that cup, right? Right? Now, he does this, what he calls calibration, which is really conditioning. Mark, let me switch it over now. Can you show me that first? Not that one, the one with those two bottles that he used.
So we know in that short period of time, he ended up at 188.
But he did that with concentrate. What do we know the concentrate has in it? Because the FDA tested it. Hydrazine. Okay? We can't, so note here what this is. This is an oxidation solution, very top of which says ORP conditioning instructions. Calls it calibration. He doesn't know. You can't call something calibration when it's actually about conditioning. Another expert, Dr. Martin, he calls it calibration as well, but it's conditioning. It's what it really says. I can't make that up. It's literally those are the words. Okay? Just like he says. Okay? And these solutions and this stuff, they have that at the Anderson facility. And there. What they're doing right there, they have the materials. And it says in here that, here bottom, Mark, this says right here, save the solution for additional applications later. Highlight that for me. In other words, those ingredients in that conditioning materials that you just saw, where they put those into two different classes, you can reuse it over and over and over again. How many times you want? As long as your solution, you can keep using it. Okay? This is store conditioner probe in white distilled vinegar. Casey Aiken said he did that. Anthony Brown said he did that. Diego Mendegana said he did that. Wayne Jones says this is what we would have done, and it's right there in the instructions that he says this is what you should follow. We did everything we were supposed to do. The only thing we couldn't do in the test when they used a concentrate as opposed to what we had is that they had these titanium tubes. We don't have those. Okay? They got to 188, we went to 148, we're only 40 away. 2,000 range meter, we're 40, negative 40 millivolts away. Percent of the entire range is available. Remember, he started in positive. He didn't start in negatives. So are we substantially similar? Yes. Following ASTM standards? Yes. With the exact same meter as far as what the guts are? Yes. We have done everything that Hallmark requires us to do in order to follow that. Why is it relevant? It's relevant to find out how long it took to do what you just saw happen. It went from positive to negative. We did the exact same thing. You just saw it happen. It went from positive this to negative that. We took one of these meters right out of the box, we put it into the solution, and we watched how long it take to get to a stable number. We did the exact same thing. Same solution. That's exactly what we're going to show the jury. The exact same process. Okay? Ours stopped at negative 148. Okay? Because we don't have the concentrate.
I understand that. So why is that important in the...
I don't think it is, but the plaintiff's saying it has to get to negative 225. We can't get there without the concentrate.
No, I get that. Well, that goes to the substantially similar issue. But
And it is substantially similar.
well, I'm trying to figure out, I mean, we have the video, it shows that that's what an ORT meter can do. And I'm trying to figure out, when they're not alleging that the product was defectively designed and or defectively manufactured,
Right?
why is this relevant?
Because they're saying that this ORT meter, the way that it was done, was inaccurate. It was inaccurate because it could not read accurately in negative alkaline waters. And what we did was we took an alkaline water. We used a test ORP meter, a different brand, and said, is this alkaline? Yes, it is. Okay, let's see if we can go anywheres without any conditioning and get negative readings. The answer was yes, we can. In other words, we went right to negative. We've now shown that in the testing. What they're saying is, well, this was inaccurate. We don't think it was inaccurate. But we have testing that we did. And we believe it is relevant to show we did do this testing, and it was relevant to show that it can be done on alkaline water. That's all we're trying to do. It doesn't matter that it's negative 225. It can be let me show you the next chart. That's the chart. Alright, can you blow that up a bit, the whole thing? Oh, no, not just that, the whole, yeah, there, yes, thank you very much. Would you give me just a minute to look at this? This may help us a bit. And then hopefully I do that. There's several different brands that are here. One of them is Aquafina up here, pH of 535, gives you green, ORP plus 381. So if I put Aquafina into a cup and I put an ORP meter in there, it should read plus 381. Okay? Arrowhead plus 275, Evian 295. Where's the sign down here? 290 plus, positive, right? Now there's two more that I want to show you. What is this Kangen water? Okay? It's negative 725. Okay? You can get alkaline water that's negative 745. But remember what I told you from our past discussions. This is based solely on electrochemical only. Electrolysis only, no chemicals. In other words, we take that water, we go buy an electrode, like the titanium tubes, so they didn't use titanium tubes in a Kangen machine, and it splits it. Positive charged water, negative charged water. We send the positively charged water down the tube, down the sink, okay, into the sewer. We do this around several different places. several different electrodes. Same electrode, we split it and split it and split it, so all we have left is negatively charged water. Okay? It's all it is negatively charged water. Okay? You can drink negatively charged water. There's no chemicals added, and it's negative 745. Okay? And that's what they tried to do at Congan. It's not what's on a trial here today. Okay? Congan's not up here. But that's what they did. Now let's go to real water. It's not negative 225. Remember, these alkaline chemicals that they've got in here degrade. So what you can have today that's manufactured could be negative 225. By the time you drink it a month later at your house, it's negative 25. But this is all they're trying to say. All I have to do, Your Honor, to match what real water wanted is be above negative 25. This is their document at their place. Look at the very top. Can we just pull that one part out? The beverages part, right? Yeah. A test of the following beverages was conducted July 2008 in California using a calibrated pinpoint, not my machine. This is a different ORP meter. Combo pH and ORP meter. This isn't my machine. They've got a different brand. They're coming up with these numbers with. It's not mine. Pinpoint hasn't been sued in this case. This is the standard that real water, this is their document. We found this at their site. Now, blow it back up, please, Mark. Remember, it's negative 25. Nothing about negative 225. I'm not saying that's the standard they weren't going for, but how do I juxtapose this with what they just said to me right here? What they're saying is, I just need an alkaline water. Anything negative. Well, I got negative 148 on my first test. Unconditioned. Substantially similar. In fact, it's substantially going wet. Over, it's more negative by 100. 123. Than what this chart requires from what they did back in testing originally for real water in 2008. At the beginning of this company, whatever they're doing now. So Dr. Babcock uses ASTM standards, comes up with a solution that's alkaline. Runs it by a test meter that he does, it's called an asperimeter, it's an ORP meter, it's just a different brand. Comes up with results. They're trying to exclude those results, saying they're not relevant. Well, it has everything to do with conditioning. How fast does it take to condition? What they're going to say is that our messaging was wrong as to how long it takes conditioning. We think you guys said it takes 5 days. Well, we went and did a test to see how long it actually took. And it took seconds, just like what Plain Jones did in that video. Okay? This is, we have a case, this guy named Brown, John Brown, or Jason Brown, said it takes days to do that. That's your Milwaukee employee, not the employee. He says it takes days to do that. Well, Jason Brown's not a chemist. He's never been involved in testing. He's in the sales department. You already said he's a manager now. And with our experience of being a chemist, you've already said that. And
I didn't think I testified, did I? What did I say that about?
You said basically that he would be the designated person, and that his video for his deposition could be used in opening statements, even though he'll be here.
I understand.
Okay? Jason Brown is certainly not qualified to tell you anything about how long it takes to condition one of these items. And most of the documents they have is post-date when the actual events that happened in this case. I know I've gone way too long to try to get this done. In fact, I've gone way too long on this, Your Honor. I apologize. We're almost up to the new now. But I hope I've provided you with all the information. We believe that this is very relevant. We believe that the testing was done. We believe we used substantially similar test solution in order to show this. We believe we used this exact meter. For all intents and purposes, one is black, one is white. We understand there's no defective product as far as manufacturing. We understand all that. We understand they're not making a claim for that. What they're claiming is that we had the bad instructions on here for as far as conditioning. We just showed you conditioning. We showed you in that video, and we showed you in this chart, and we showed you by the testing that they did. This case has to do with conditioning, and Dr. Babcock's testing under Hallmark is well within the parameters of Hallmark. We cannot let Mr. Pepperman, as a chemist, an advocate for his side, be the person that tells us, no, it was not substantially similar. In his motion, he doesn't cite to Dr. Motley and say, Dr. Motley says it wasn't substantially similar. That's not what it says. He doesn't cite to anyone that says that. That's not the proper standard to be used by a court.
I don't mind saying this. I don't think you have to have an expert stand for the proposition whether something's substantially similar or not. Case in point, you go out and do a coefficient of friction on a walkway surface.
Okay.
Right? And if it wasn't the same walkway surface, then you don't need an expert to say it wasn't the same walkway surface. You just need to show testimony or evidence that that wasn't the same walkway surface.
And what's the difference between the water that we tested and the water that was at Real Water? The only difference is titanium tubes.
Well, I think there's two things here. I mean, and I don't, was titanium tubing, the failure to have it, is that fatal? Well, we'll find out. But my point is this.
Can we get those? Is it impossible? In other words, at some point the judge has to say, well, is it fatal for something that Mr. Rasmussen can't replicate? I'm doing the best I can with everything else. I'm doing it at certain intervals.
But see, that's not really the standard as far as whether, I mean, sometimes testing can be replicated. Sometimes it can't.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the issues there. And I was just trying to figure out at the very outset, how is it relevant to a product liability action where there's no allegation of the fact that there was a manufacturing and or design defect, and so issues focusing on the warnings, literature, inserts, and packaging, something like that.
Right. And have they shown you any of the literature or packaging yet to talk about this?
Well, no, that's a different issue that deals specifically with whether the packaging and warnings and the like are adequate or not.
Right. So this wasn't substantially similar. We were substantially similar in every way, so we don't have titanium tubes. Is that fatal? No. Do those matter? Because what we are is within what? 3% on this range. 3%.
Lastly, this is my last question for you. Since we have, is it Mr. Blaine Jones?
Yeah.
We have this video. Why is there necessity?
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Because he did it in a certain time with the concentrate. We can mimic the same thing even without the concentrate. We can mimic the same thing. We can show you that alkaline can be read right out of the box.
That's what he showed, right?
No, we didn't. We don't know what he did other than doing that stuff in that oxidation MA9025 solution. That's all he did.
Did he testify as to what he did?
No, he has not yet. But we see it. Yeah, we have those same things. The point, but there's
the big difference between him and I'm speculating. You can tell me if this is true or not. That whatever solution he had or utilized, I would anticipate titanium tubing was part of the process.
He would tell you that what they did with Mr. Marlowe, was use titanium tubes manufactured in Russia with porcelain coating, which we do not have available for Dr. Babcock in 2023. And so to penalize us for not having Russian-made porcelain-coated titanium tubes, the same as what Mr. Marlowe used, and the ones that Mr. Kemp's already told you were fitted and used. We can't use them. They're not available. Okay? Can't be done. That can't be a penalty for whether or not we got as substantially similar as we could. We used every mineral Real Water said that they used in creating Real Water. We put all that there. We used purified water. We did everything we could except for, and I told you at the beginning, we didn't do that, because we can't. We should not be penalized for something that we can't do. And there's a law that came out during the Ukrainian war that said you can't get stuff from Russia. We tried.
And I can probably take judicial notice of that, right? I think that's true.
Argue, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's.
No, we would object to that. There's no evidence before the court as to what efforts they made or didn't make to try and get
That's a
titanium
Christian.
tubes. I mean, it's a cute argument, but we should have some actual evidence.
I understand. And I'll take that into consideration, Mr. Odou. Come on.
Whether or not the law exists, whether or not there's an
Embargo on Russian-made materials, I think, can be taken as judicial notice.
Well, I mean, if,
Once there's foundation.
yes, I understand that. I get it.
All right. Those are the points that I've made. Other than that one area that I can't recreate, we did everything else we could to recreate, and we got negative 148. And that's very, very close to what they were trying to achieve. And the conditioning that was done, we saw how long it took to be done. And we did that right out of the box. Okay? Blaine Jones did in the middle, he said 5 minutes in order to put those two different classes. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.